I'm honored to have you here, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to our channel, where today's focus is all about Afghan Armed Forces. Let's get started. The Afghan Armed Forces, officially the Armed Forces of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, Dari, also referred to as the Islamic Emirate Armed Forces, is the military of Afghanistan, commanded by the Taliban government from 1997 to 2001 and since August 2021. According to Afghanistan's Ministry of Defense, its total manpower is 170,000. The Taliban created the first iteration of the Emirates Armed Forces in 1997 after taking over Afghanistan following the end of the Afghan Civil War, which raged between 1992 and 1996. However, the first iteration of the armed forces was dissolved in 2001 after the downfall of the first Taliban government following the United States invasion of Afghanistan. It was officially re-established on 8 November 2021 after the Taliban's victory in the war in Afghanistan on 15 August 2021 following the recapture of Kabul and the collapse of the US-backed Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and its Afghan National Army as a whole, with the re-establishment of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan after being out of power for 20 years. Now, it's time to shift gears and explore history of the armed forces. In April 1978, there was a coup known as the Saur Revolution, orchestrated by members of the government loyal to the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan (PDPA). This led to a full-scale Soviet invasion in December 1979, led by the 40th Army and the Airborne Forces. In 1981, the total strength of the Afghan Armed Forces was around 85,000 troops according to the New York Times. The Afghan Army had around soldiers, mostly conscripts. The Air Force had around 7,000 personnel, and the total of all military personnel was around 87,000 in 1984. Throughout the years, the Afghan Armed Forces was heavily involved in fighting against the multinational Mujahideen rebel groups who were largely backed by the United States and trained by the Pakistan Armed Forces. The rebel groups were fighting to force the Soviet Union to withdraw from Afghanistan as well as to remove the Soviet-backed government of President Mohammad Najibullah. Due to large number of defectors, the Afghan Armed Forces in 1985 were reduced to no more than about 47,000, the actual figure probably being lower. The Air Force had over 150 combat aircraft with about 7,000 officers who were supported by up to 5,000 Cuban Revolutionary Air and Air Defense Force and Czechoslovak Air Force advisors. Under the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, weapon deliveries by the Soviets were increased and included MiG-24 helicopters, MiG-23 fighter aircraft, ZSU-23 for Shilka and ZSU-57-2 anti-aircraft self-propelled mounts, MTLB armored personnel carriers, BM-27 Aragon and BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket systems and IC Lunar M and Scud missile launchers. Some of the weapons that were not damaged during the decades of wars are still being used today. Weapons supplies were made available to the Mujahideen rebel groups through numerous countries. The United States purchased all of Israel's captured Soviet weapons clandestinely and then funneled the weapons to the Mujahideen rebels, while Egypt upgraded their own army's weapons and sent the older weapons to the Mujahideen. Turkey sold its World War II stockpiles, and the British and Swiss provided blowpipe missiles and Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns respectively, after they were found to be poor models for their own forces. China provided the most relevant weapons, likely due to their own experience with guerrilla warfare, and kept meticulous record of all the shipments. Following the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, the Mujahideen rebel attacks continued and grew in intensity. For several years, the Afghan Armed Forces had actually increased their effectiveness past levels ever achieved during the Soviet military presence. The 11-year siege of Khost ended with the city's fall in March 1991. But the government was dealt a major blow when Abdul Rashid Dostum, a leading general, switched allegiances to the Mujahideen forces in 1992 and together they captured the city of Kabul. By 1992, the Afghan army fragmented into regional militias under local warlords because of the fall of the Soviet Union, which stopped supplying the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan's armed forces, and later in 1992 when the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan government lost power. After the fall of Mohammad Najibullah's regime in 1992, the various Afghan political parties began to assemble their own more formal armed forces. By February 1992, Masoud Jamiat-i-Islami had a central force reported at 6 battalions strong, plus additional second-tier units, the bulk of the army made up of regional battalions, subordinate to local commanders of the Supervisory Council. On 16 January 1993, Jane's Defense Weekly reported that a special assembly of 1335 delegates elected from across Afghanistan had both elected Professor Burhanuddin Rabbani as president of the Islamic State of Afghanistan for 2 years, and agreed to establish a regular army with soldiers mostly drawn from Mujahideen groups. Pakistan had offered training assistance. However, a civil war started between the various warlords, including Ahmad Shah Massoud, Ghabuddin Hikmatyar, Abdul Rashid Dostum, Abdul Ali Mazari, Jalaluddin Haqqani, Ismail Khan, Atta Muhammad Noor, Abdul Rasul Sayyif, Muhammad Nabi Mohammadi, Muhammad Yunus Khalis, Gul Aga Sherzai, and many others. The Taliban movement arose around Kandahar in southern Afghanistan and defeated the various armed movements there that had swabbled since the dissolution of the previous Afghan Army and Afghan Air Force. They moved to confront Ahmad Shah Massoud's forces by marching to the gates of Kabul in March 1995. During the Taliban maintained 400 T and T-62 tanks and more than 200 armoured personnel carriers. The Taliban also began training its own army and commanders. After the removal of the Taliban government in late 2001, private armies loyal to warlords gained more and more influence. In mid-2001, Ali Jalali wrote, during the Taliban's Air Force had 5 supersonic MiG-UMPs and 10 Sukhoi 22 fighter bombers. They also had 6 Mi-8 helicopters, 5 Mis, 5 LRX, 6 ANs, 25 ANs, a dozen and 24 ADANs, an IL-18, and a Yakovlev. Their civil air service contained 2 Boeing EOBs, a Tu-154, 5 ANs, and a DHC-6. On 3 August 1995, Taliban Mikoyan Durovich MiG-21 fighters forced a Russian Ilyushin-76 cargo plane carrying arms from Albania to Afghanistan to land at Kandahar. Negotiations between the Russian government and the Taliban to free the men stalled for over a year, and efforts by American Senator Hank Brown to mediate between the two parties broke down over a prisoner exchange. Brown was able to get the Taliban to agree that the Russian crew should be allowed to maintain their aircraft. This request paved the way for their escape. Now, let's dig deeper into Army and unveil the hidden treasures it holds within. The Army under the Taliban Islamic movement was inaugurated on 8 November 2021 as the Army of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is also referred to as the Islamic Emirate Army and the Afghan Army. To date, the army itself relies heavily on captured hardware from the defeated Afghan National Army. Approximately 2,000 vehicles fell into Taliban hands after the fall of Kabul, including the Humvee, Guardian, Max Pro MRAP and Oshkosh ATV. In terms of infantry equipment, captured items include the carbine, rifle, night vision goggles, body armor suits, communication equipment, and shoulder-mounted grenade launchers. These US-made firearms are reportedly replacing Russian-made AKs and AKs carried by most Taliban fighters. From 1 September 2021 to 10 January 2022, 15,102 newly trained fighters were inducted into the Islamic Emirate Army as calculated on the official site. The average number of new soldiers inducted is 120 soldiers per week, not counting paramilitaries. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting formation and structure and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. Currently, the conventional land forces of the Islamic Emirate Army are subdivided into 8 corps, mostly superseding the previous corps of the former Afghan National Army. The Conventional Land Warfare Corps of the Islamic Emirate Army were renamed in November 2021 by Mullah Yaqub, Acting Minister of Defense. They are listed below. Corps. All the corps beyond Kabul can be definitively tied to previous Afghan National Army ANA formations. However, the number 313 was not utilized by the ANA in Kabul or beyond, and the only former Taliban unit with that number was the Dari 313 Battalion. Other reported units include the Victorious Force Unit and the Panipat Unit. The Dari 313 Battalion, the Red Unit, and the Yarmouk 60 Special Forces Battalion may have some Special Forces capabilities. These are not to be confused with the Afghanistan GCPSU, which functioned under the Islamic Republic up until 2021 as a police tactical unit. In this section, we'll be deep diving into Air Force, unraveling its complexities and uncovering valuable insights. The Taliban created and ran a small air force from 1996 to 2001. After the re-establishment of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and the fall of Kabul during the 2021 Taliban offensive, the Taliban established the Air Force of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is also referred to as the Islamic Emirate Air Force and the Afghan Air Force. The Air Force acquired UH-60 Black Hawks, Milmes, most of them without engines, Milmes, a 29 Super Tucanos, Cessna Urs, and C-130 Hercules. On 11 January 2022, the Air Force successfully repaired and flew unserviceable aircraft which were abandoned by the U.S. Army and the former Afghan National Army after Kabul fell to the Taliban. A new Taliban commander of the Afghan Air Force spoke as part of the announcement. Brace yourselves for the next chapter, where we'll be dissecting conscription. According to the testimony of Guantanamo detainees before their combatant status review tribunals, the Taliban, in addition to conscripting men to serve as soldiers, also conscripted men to staff its civil service. As we progress through this video, let's shift our attention towards conscription of children and uncover its hidden depths. According to a report from the University of Oxford, the Taliban made widespread use of the conscription of children in 1997, 1998, and 1999. During the civil war that preceded the Taliban regime, thousands of orphan boys joined various militia for employment, food, shelter, protection, and economic opportunity. The report said that during its initial period the Taliban long depended upon cohorts of youth. Witnesses stated that each land-owning family had to provide one young man and $500 in expenses. In August of 1999, approximately 5,000 students aged between 15 and 35 left madrasas in Pakistan to join the Taliban. Have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos? Let me know in the comments.